Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi ta'ala barakatuh. Good morning, everyone. Today's lesson is about writing a scientific topic, which is also one of the most important skills in academic writing. Scientific writing helps you as student to think more clearly, communicate research better, and prepare for your graduate study. This lesson will cover 7 main parts. I will begin with an introduction. Then, what is scientific writing? After that, what makes scientific writing unique? Move on to the scope of scientific writing. Next, the main features of scientific writing. After that, guide to write in biological science. Finally, conclusion. Choosing and formulating scientific topic is not just about selecting an interesting idea, but it involves identifying clear research problem, understanding its context within existing knowledge, and defining focused questions that can be investigated scientifically. A well-defined topic guides the entire research process. It shapes the objectives, determines the methodology, and influences how the results are interpreted and communicated. Without a clear and relevant topic, even well-conducted research may lack direction and impact. Let us begin by understanding what scientific writing is. Scientific writing is the specialized way scientists communicate research findings, methods, and interpretations to other scientists and scholarly audiences. It includes many forms, such as research articles, literature reviews, laboratory reports, grant proposals, and conference posters. All of these are essential tools for recording and sharing scientific knowledge. Now the question is, what makes scientific writing unique? Scientific writing is usually clear, precise, objective, and evidence-based. It's not mainly about style or personal expression, but is about making scientific information understandable, reproducible, and useful to readers in the field. And you can think of scientific writing as the official language of research. It records what was studied, how it was studied, what was found, and why it mattered. Now, the question is, why we read scientific articles? The scope is broad because it covers many purposes, and it includes reporting original research in journal articles, summarizing existing knowledge in review articles, describing experiments in lab reports and method sections, presenting research plans in proposals and grant applications, communicating findings in posters, abstracts, and conference materials. Now the question is, what's the key characteristic of scientific writing? Scientific writing usually follows structured format, such as introduction, methods, result, discussion, and conclusion. It also depends on accurate terminology, logical organization, and enough details for others to evaluate or reproduce the work. The guide to writing in biological science consists of 8 steps, as illustrated in this figure. and we will discover each step in detail in the following slides. The first step is the before steps, or before writing. Scientific writing should not be treated as a last-minute task. Instead, it's a critical part of the research process that begins early, which means that it should plan in a clear story and understanding the audience before drafting. Moreover, before writing, researchers need to understand the existing literature and identify what's already known, and what remains unknown, and why the topic is minor. This helps define knowledge gap that the study will address. At the same time, it's important to think about the audience. A good writer always asks, who am I writing for? What do they need to understand? And what the message should they take away? So, the goal is to communicate a clear message that connects your work to previous research and shows its importance. The second step is the introduction. The introduction should give the reader enough background to understand the study, then narrow from the broad topic to specific research question. So, the introduction sets the tone of the paper. It begins with a broad context and gradually narrows down to specific research question. The introduction sets the tone of the paper by moving from general context to a focused problem. It should help the reader see why the topic is important before presenting the exact question you are investigating. A strong introduction includes relevant background information, explain the importance of the topic, identifies knowledge gap, and clearly state how that study will address that gap. The introduction also presents the main hypothesis and briefly outlines the approach. However, it should avoid unnecessary detail, long historical reviews, or unrelated information. So, when you write a scientific introduction, you should avoid the following. First, including every detail from the literature. Second, turning the introduction into the full story of the field. Third, adding information that does not support the main story of the paper. And finally, leaving the reader unsure about the purpose of the study. The introduction has simple structure. Start broad, narrow to the specific issue, state the research gap or the knowledge gap, present the hypothesis, briefly introduce the study design. The third step is the material and methods. This section explains exactly how the study was conducted, so that others can replicate it. And it should be organized clearly, written in chronological order, and include the procedures, equipment details, and statistical analysis used, along with references if methods are borrowed from other studies. So the main purpose of this section is to show that the methods were significantly valid and transparent. And it's usually straightforward to write because it follows the actual workflow of the experiment. When writing this section, it's important to include the following. Subsections for different procedures, such as field collections and laboratory analysis. Step-by-step methods in the order they were done. Equipment names, models numbers, and settings. Statistical tests and analysis. Enough detail for replication. And citations if the method was taken from another source. At the same time, there are some things to avoid. You should not repeat unnecessary details from already published methods. And you should not include interpretation or discussion of the results. Also, minor errors or deviations should only be mentioned if they are important enough to affect the results. A good practice is to use clear headings to organize the section. This helps the reader follow the procedure easily and creates strong connection with the result and discussion sections. Overall, materials and methods section should remain factual and objective, focusing only on what was done and how it was done. Now, let us move to the results section. This section presents the main findings clearly and objectively, without interpretation. It should focus on the most important figures, tables, and data, and describe the result in a short, organized way that prepares the reader for the discussion. The main purpose here is simple, which is report the result, not explain them. And it should be written as factual reports of the study's outcomes. While writing the result section, you should include only the key graphs, tables, and data that support your research story. Each result should be briefly summarized with clear references to the corresponding figures or tables. The information should be organized logically, usually following the same order as materials and methods section. And it's important to highlight the biological meaning of the data, not just statistical values. And you should clearly describe the direction and the size of observed effects, while using statistics only as support evidence. Now, how to write this section? Be specific about direction and size of effects. Use statistics only as support, not as the main focus. Write in a way that helps the reader understand the findings in plain scientific language. If the study is complex, divide the result into subsections with headings. However, there are some important points to avoid. You should not interpret the results or explain why they occurred or happened. You should also avoid including too much unnecessary detail or presenting all data at once without clear organization. You should also avoid including too much unnecessary detail or presenting all data at once without clear organization. The next step is discussion and conclusion. This part should connect the introduction and results into one clear story. The discussion and conclusion explain what the results mean, how they answer the research question, and why the study is important. Compare findings with earlier research and end with broader significance of the work. The main purpose of the discussion is to interpret the results, not simply repeat them. And it should remind the reader of the original knowledge gap and clearly show how the study has helped to fill that gap. In this section, you should highlight the main findings and explain how they related to your hypothesis or research question. It's also important to consider alternative explanations for the results and to compare your findings with those of previous studies. In addition, you should mention any caveats, limitations, or biases that might affect the interpretation. And you should mention the broader importance and implications of the study in the conclusion. So, a strong discussion usually begins by clearly stating the main finding. After that, each result is explained with evidence from the study, and alternative interpretations are considered when needed. The conclusion, on the other hand, should not simplify, repeat the results. Instead, it should broaden the perspective and emphasize the overall importance and implication of the study. There are also some common mistakes to avoid. You should not repeat the results section word for word, ignoring contradictory evidence or alternative explanations, ending only with limitations instead of significance. And the conclusion should not be too narrow or overly repetitive. The next step is putting it all together. A strong scientific paper is not just about having right sections, but is about how those sections connected to form one clear and readable story. This requires smooth flow, clear structure, strong writing voice, and careful word choice. The main idea here is that paper should move naturally from one point to the next point, within sentences and between paragraphs. New points should connect it logically to what comes before it, so the reader can follow the agreement without confusion. In terms of writing style, it's generally recommended to use active voice, as it makes sentences clearer and more direct. However, the passive voice can still be useful in certain cases, especially when it improves the flow or keeps the focus on the right subject. Word choice is also very important. The writers should use simple and direct language rather than complex or overly technical expressions. The goal is not to sound impressive, but to communicate the science as clearly as possible. Another step is editing and peer review. These are critical final steps in scientific writing. After completing the first draft, the work is not finished. So, after the first drafting, you should step away from the paper, reread it carefully, check the structure and clarity, and then ask someone else to review it for fresh feedback. The main idea of this section is simple. The first draft is not the finished version. The writers need to review their work to identify missing ideas, unclear sections, weak flow, and language issues, such as grammar or spellings. An effective editing process usually starts by taking a short break before revising. This helps you to read the paper with fresh eyes. Then you should check whether the text clearly communicates your intended message. It's important also to look for gaps in the agreement, unclear transitions, and unnecessary details. It's important also to look for gaps in the agreement, unclear transitions, and unnecessary details. The revision should be done in stages. First, focus on content and overall organization. Then, refine sentence structure and word choice. The purpose is to ensure that all key ideas are included and that anything unnecessary is removed. In addition to self-editing, peer review plays a crucial role. Sharing your work with another reader, such as a classmate or colleague, friend or family member, that can provide valuable feedback. Because a new reader can spot unclear sections that the writer may miss, and this practice reflects the real peer review process used in science. The last step is conclusion. The conclusion says that writing is a skill that keeps improving over time, even for professional scientists. And it's not something mastered in a single attempt, but rather improve through continuous practice and reflection. The main idea here is that scientific writing is learned step by step through practice. And as writers gain more experience, they become more confident and gradually develop their own style. It's also important to remember that writing can always be refined. Using effective strategies make the process easier and more organized. But there is no one correct format for every paper. The experience helps writers to find their own voice, based on their field, audience, and purpose. To conclude, writing a scientific topic is a crucial first step in any research process. It requires clarity, focus, and a good understanding of the field. A strong topic is not only interesting, but also specific, relevant, and grounded in existing knowledge. It helps define the research direction and ensure that the study addresses a meaningful question. Thank you for your attention.